What is up, guys? Got a fun video for you today. Today's video, we're looking at the Balance Council, kind of all the new stuff we have with GWENT, showing you what I'm gonna submit for mine, things I considered, and like just a little bit of discussion that'll kind of go over all the different balance and stuff with like GWENT in general and maybe the future of it, all that good stuff. Just gonna kind of hit record and just see where it goes. So first off, we'll start with the changes that I have, and one of the things that I really wanted to focus on a bit was kind of not necessarily like decks or archetypes or anything like that, but also just like, you know, types of cards that could really use some love. And one of the biggest things I thought of that, an example of this would be Devotion, right? I think Devotion bronzes need to be like above the line for what you'd expect for a bronze card, and very clear set over that, not just kind of hanging out there right there in the middle, because you know 4P and 5Ps, we've seen the ceiling go up on them quite a bit over the years, and so the devotion cards like aren't even really, you know, that far ahead. They're just kind of middle of the pack, and you throw them in there if you're going devotion, but overall you're not playing devotion too much just because of how great some of these neutral cards are. So with that, if you're going to sacrifice not being able to play like on a Neuromancy, you know, a Heat Wave, good stuff like that, you should have some good payoffs for it. And one of the best ways to do that is the bronzes, you know, not putting absolutely busted golds and stuff. So with the power increases, looking at Kerack Marine and Elle Conquer, just boosting them up power, right? So now they're playing for 8s. And I think that'd be a pretty decent stat line, right? 4 for 8 if you're going devotion. And then other 4Ps should be like maybe conditional 7s. You know, you have to work for it a bit over a long round, something like that, or a huge drawback. You know, like the one where if it loses its armor, it dies. That's pretty good. And then I think still lean more towards, you know, going towards 6 for 4. And then sometimes you just have your 4 for 4s if they provide like utility, like Peller, Squirrel, things like that. So I would recommend doing the power increase on these, just kind of some better devotion payoff. Then the other one I have in here is Cleaver's Muscle. This is kind of a something when you're doing all this that you have to pay attention to with like indirect stuff, or, you know, card in a vacuum versus all of the kind of chains that'll go through and impacts and connections and synergies. You get the idea. So this not only helps just Syndicate, because obviously the one thing is with Cleaver, right? Makes the spawns off of him that much better. Could bring this card back. I remember when this card was almost like oppressive, but it's really disappeared. This would be a nice indirect buff to Cleaver without changing, you know, provisions or power aspect of him. And then it also, Novigradian Justice, slight buff to that, you get 1 extra point, which helps Dwarf decks, which, you know, Dwarf decks I think are still a little underpowered. You know, they could take a couple extra points here. And then also just in a vacuum, it's getting this more in line with what I was saying about where they need to be at probably like a 6 for 4. Remember this card was like 5 provisions. It's an absolute joke. But so in a vacuum, all right, the card's way more playable, and then it has all these indirect synergies. I think pretty good payoff. Can't complain with it. So this is what I'm going with power. Now for decrease, Nauzica Sergent. Oh my gosh, this card, I'm surprised it had not been changed till now. And, you know, I know everyone's worried that NG is going to get over nerfed or whatever, but this card definitely needs to be addressed, and I'm pretty positive it will, because a lot of my sentiments here aren't, you know, just unique to me. Not only is this card very solid for just points, you know, you're getting 10 for 6, you can't complain with that stat line. You also get armor, which that can provide you 2 extra points. It can also, you know, be even better with slave drivers, right? Because they're only pinging that armor. They're not taking away any points. So, you know, it can almost be like a 12 for 6 in those regards, if that armor is absorbing damage. Second of all, because Assimilate is so flexible, and for, you know, it just procs on anything that you're spawning that was not in your starting deck. It is a keyword that to me is way too flexible, and I really wish Assimilate would have changed how it was procced. You know, you think like Resupply. Resupply is only warfare cards. That's it. Nothing else is proccing it. Assimilate, a million things can proc it. It's kind of dumb. But, so Nauzica Sergeants, right? They're proccing Assimilate too when you play them. So it's not this like, oh, you know, I play this in a soldier's deck or whatever. It's like, no, you want to play it in Assimilate. And honestly, you're just playing it in everything because it's just crazy points. The drawback really isn't that bad. have your opponent, you know, win a round. And that's why, like, I don't want this to be like a 7p card or completely overhaul it, because there at least is something, but the drawback isn't like crazy. So I think taking away a power makes the stat line a little bit more reasonable. It's a little start. It's not going too heavy, because I think 3 power versus 7 provisions is, you know, pulling way back, because the provision nerf or buff is usually more significant. So this card, I think, with another bronze that, well, you can probably already see there, if those two are just addressed, I think we're fine. There's some other ones we could, but I honestly hope, you know, not all these pretty solid Nilfgaard bronzes are hit, because that'd be too much. But I think Nauzica Sergent is definitely one. So now I know this isn't doing anything because, you know, it plays for like what, 19 points instead of 20 or whatever that would be. Actually no, it's like 22, so it's like 21 instead of 22 points. But it's a start. Hopefully we can get this thing down even lower, just keep decreasing base power to be more reasonable. The point slam with Sove is just unreal, especially combined with the leader that you're playing it with, Patricidal Fury. This card needs to be addressed. Didn't want to always just do provisions, because just bumping everything up provisions, like, that's just going to create issues, and it's going to limit deck building, right? If you're just taking all these good golds and they're all like going to be 13, 14 provisions. It's like, no, let's just decrease the base power on some of these and kind of bring it to more reasonable levels. And granted, like I said, just making him 11 base power isn't really changing much with the card, but it can get the ball rolling. A couple votes through, we could get him, I think, to a more reasonable place. For the last one here, Angus. This is just simply, like, I know ST isn't in the best spot, so it's not like, oh my gosh, like, I gotta make sure one of my votes goes to ST. It's just, Elle's is still pretty strong, and Heist is awkward, but Angus can just make that deck unbelievably stupid strong. When you go like Heist twice onto him, it's unreal. So the reason why I want it decreased here, because it's like, you know, all his points are mostly with the Elven Deadeyes, like what's 6 power doing? 6 power there is just so it can be answered easier, right? At this, because you're probably not locking it, because they're always running the Purifies, because they, you know, getting rid of the status so they can keep doing the cargoes onto it. With 6, more things can answer, because there's a lot of cards that can do 6 damage out there, can keep it under control, because right now, you know, it's really only Heat Wave, I'd say, unless you're going to do something crazy like Becker's Rock Slide, which is just wasting provisions at that point, and, you know, you're not even get the full, you're over damaging. So that's just why I think that should be adjusted there, and I think you wouldn't want to do provisions with this, because you do want to give, you know, some SD some power for like traps or elves, like, okay, we're getting some, you know, making our Deadeyes more valuable, but you at least have a chance to answer us when it goes on the board and not just have to do a 7-point Heat Wave. So that's why I went with that. Now to provisions. And there's a lot you could do for provision increase and provision decrease. It's hard to narrow it down, but here's what I have. So first up, Imperial Marine. Pretty self-explanatory. This card just does so much, and it was a 4 provision card, right? Haven't been playing GWENT as much before these last 2 patches where I've really dived into it, but when this card was released, you know, it was like a 4 provision card. Like, I don't know what was up with that. Same thing with like the Reaver Scouts, right? Those were 4 provision cards, and now they're sitting at 6 and still kind of feel pretty playable at 6. It's wild. Anyways, so not only is this like a Fisher King, where it's going to top deck a card, right, move it up, and then turns into a 2-point per turn engine, that you can play multiple copies of, right? You know, you've got that location that spawns one, you've got slave drivers that can get you more, you've got the 2 you can already have in your deck. It's just unreal what the utility this card provides. You know, not only is it thinning, which, you know, you usually pay a hefty price for thinning, usually, and then 2, it's 2-point per turn engine. Like, absolutely crazy. This card needs to go to 6 provisions, and this isn't a one where, like, you know, in Nauzica Sergeant, like, okay, we can kind of curve the ceiling of this a little bit. With an engine like this that isn't just kind of point slam deploy, provision is going to be way more impactful. And with a bronze card, right, when you move it up or down in provision categories, right, it's a 2 provision nerf to the deck, which will be pretty hefty. Yeah, like the Reaver decks, since I mentioned Scouts or whatever, right? When Reaver Hunters went up to 6, and then now Scouts are up to 6, that's losing 4 provisions for those decks, and that's pretty huge. That is a significant curve to it. So I think that's what needs to go here, because I think just 3 base power isn't doing much. Just a lot of utility here, and because irregardless of the 2 points per turn engine, which you could try and curve, it's just, right, Fisher King is 6 provisions, this is 5. Like, if it's doing what Fisher King can do but better, should probably at least be what, his provisions are. Next we have Kaer Trolde. Originally a 9p card, is probably on its way to being 11 provisions. Something I debated with this, and I'll talk about, with some of these locations, I feel a little bit, sometimes the issue is still like Dwimbiandra, right? It's not so much like, okay, Kaer Trolde, you get to play on-crate unit, and then you get to clash with the unit. But then you got Dwimbiandras that can replay it, and replay it, and replay it, and it's just, that to me would be more of an issue. And so it's like, would you actually want to hit Dwimbiandra? Because, that Dwimbiandra can work on several other decks, and has provided significant power to it, but in some cases, like Dwimbiandra keeps some of those, like Alchemy, really kind of keeps that deck going and afloat. Would you really want to hurt Alchemy by hitting Dwimbiandra? And irregardless of that, just in a nutshell, still, even just in a 1 use, this kind of seems like an 11 provision card, because you can get 5 provision cards off of this, and then like with your Patricidal Fury, or a card that Tyr is playing out, these insane units can just delete so much stuff. You get the 6 armor on top, like, it's not just a clash. So very easily plays for over 10 points, and you can get a lot with it, and also just the utility. Just very strong. Needs to be 11 provisions, I feel. Here's another one that's a little bit of debate, right? This is, I think, one of the most troublesome cards in Gwent history, because completely changed the way that, like, the power curve, I think, works. Because if you're buffing a card from 10 to 9, that's all of a sudden a different ball game, because now you can play it in Golden Nekker decks. And just being able to spit out 3 cards and pretty much 3 engines in a turn is just very crazy, because their design philosophy for a bit was like playing 2 cards in a turn was too much, right? All the leaders that could do that, they were getting rid of them. And then they have something like Golden Nekker come out, and right, three cards in a turn. It's just crazy, and can be even more, right? If you go into like Roach, or is it Roche? I can never remember, but the NR guy who plays 2 from your deck, right? Now you got 4 units out. Just crazy stuff. So yes, and I'm glad that they did the new Siri Nova and Golden Nekker excluded from this condition. Thank you, CDPR, that allows us to actually balance this card. So saying all this stuff, it's like, makes sense. Like, yeah, we need to bump it up, because it's just like, this is like 12, 13 provision utility in a 9 provision card. The only thing that's just kind of hesitant with this, where it's just like, is it even doing anything? Because with all these changes coming in, if you bump Golden Nekker up 1, but we're bringing other cards down 1 that were already kind of Golden Nekker cards, it's like, then nothing changes, right? The deck just still is able to keep its provision limit. So that's kind of just a consideration. Like, do I want to even spend a vote on this? Like, is it really changing much, right? Like, if a lot of people are talking about Compass. Compass is 10p, Golden Nekker is 9. If they basically switch, okay, nothing really changed. You can play Compass in there now. Golden Nekker list is actually stronger. Like, so that was just a consideration. Also, what I do appreciate with like Golden Nekker and Siri Nova, a little less so Siri Nova, it's really Golden Nekker, is that it allowed decks that had like a lot of 5p engines, NR, Engine Vomit, Movement Scoia'tael, that stuff. It like made them really viable and very competitive, whereas before, like, not as much. They were almost just kind of win more. But with being able to get those engines out, and not just, okay, I played an engine, they answered it. I played an engine, they answered it. You're overwhelming the board, and so you can actually get your combos off. And so I really appreciate that with Golden Nekker. And so if it's nerfed too much, I don't want to see those decks go away. Because to me, the best part of Gwent is like kind of almost these greedy decks just going up against each other. I don't like just point slam versus point slam, and I don't like back when we had like super huge control metas. It's just not a lot of fun. Like, I'd want to see my cool engine deck go off, and I want to see your cool engine deck go off, and whoever sequenced and planned better and did, you know, a little bit more careful consideration of placement or when to, you know, sequence this and activate that wins the game. And it's just more entertaining to me to see. Like, complete opinion thing, not gonna like die on this hill, but so I like how Golden Nekker promoted that. And I also feel like kind of since this card has come out or whatever, like heavy control has gone away. I think decks now are a little bit more of a better balance, because I think it just kind of came to the point also with the increasing power levels of cards where people are like, yeah, I can't just run complete control because I have no points or whatever. Like, I can't shut down these Golden Nekker decks. These other ones that are just going a little bit more greedy or more point slam are just absolutely demolishing me. So I think decks have been a little bit more balanced where people have some, you know, critical control tools. Obviously, Heat Wave's still around. You still see a lot of locks, things like that. But right, you're seeing a lot less of like those 5p damage cards, you know, which I'm all for. I want to see these combos go off. So that's kind of a discussion, and there's so much more you can talk about the Golden Nekker, but I'm still going to put it in there. I do think the utility that card provides is just absolutely insane, and it should probably be a 10, 11p card. Last category for what I'm voting for, decreasing provisions. There are so many cards that can go in here, but I went with 3. First one's Portal. Card has been completely outclassed. I mean, I remember when it was changed, because again, playing 2 cards in the same turn was like too much. But now we've moved so far past that this card needs to get brought down in levels, because it still has that delay on it. It's timer 3, right? Yeah. So definitely taking my number 1 spot for provision decrease. Portal would be pretty good. It's kind of a different consistency tool. It's built around 4Ps, so that kind of creates some interesting deck building things. So yeah, I'd like to see this card played. And I like playing it, and you know, kind of the balance of like, do I run a squirrel or do I want a Portal pulling it out? Like, how do you set that up? And if you're only going for certain sets of bronzes, that completely changes how you're approaching the deck building, right? Because you're not loading up on 4Ps to stack, you know, to have this huge disparity between the gold end of your deck and the bronze end. So that is something to kind of just look at and consider with it. And when I do, I'm like, you know, that's fine. We'll make it 11p. Lilit's Omen. Yeah, this needs to go down. So I think really, I don't entirely know what the design choice was for it. I think maybe like Death Wish, like, oh, you could play 2 Death Wish cards and then you could like instantly activate. You know, if you wanted like Manticore and Werecat. I can't really think of any right now. I know nobody plays Werecat, but you could get like instant activation, but that's not good at all, right? Like, that just doesn't make sense. And so the only way you're kind of doing this is with Koshchi and Kikimor Queen, which is a pretty cool combo. And there's some ways where it's, you know, that armor absorbs some of it that they have, and then also, you know, you kind of want those cards lower power so you get more spawns off of it. But you're also losing points, right? And for an 11 provision card, it's just like, what's going on here? Like, it's already going to have such limited application that it should not be that expensive. I'd argue it could probably even go down to 9p, but again, remember, this is like the great balancer. Like, if it's going into 9p, you know there'll be a Golden Nekker deck that'll just break the game, right? Somehow, some way, someone's going to craft something. It's just going to be busted. So, you know, I think at least 10p makes it a little bit more playable. Yeah, it's definitely taking one of my votes. Last one, Draug. I just don't think this needs to be a 13 provision card anymore. You know, it is kind of a decent threat because it's like, boom, we get all this damage out there. There's no way they're answering all of them except for, like, what is it, Ox? But, you know, who plays that card? But when you really think about it, like, you're not spawning too many Revenants off of that, right? You're usually, well, you're probably getting like 4 to 5 is when you flip it, and you're probably only spawning 2 or 3 after that. I just don't think this card warrants that 13 provision cost, and especially because it's so competitive up in that provision range for Northern Realms that it's like, let's make this card a little bit more playable, you know? I wouldn't mind seeing like some of these, you know, well, I guess just Spectre decks, Revenant decks, however you want to say it, make a comeback, because those are pretty cool back in the day, the kind of Revenant control stuff. So yeah, that gets my vote. There's kind of the overall of why I voted for each one. Now I'll kind of run through and give some suggestions that you guys could consider. You could vote if you disagree with any of these. You could even disagree with what I already to bring up. Would like to hear about it. And it's just tricky because it's hard not to just zero in on like, oh yeah, this card's overcosted, or which card do I focus on for, first, and all these other situations, like, and just balance the entire game. Like, okay, here you guys go, have at it. It's probably a nightmare, and there's probably some like trains of thought or anything here that probably isn't the most logical or makes the most sense, or more experienced player would be like, yeah, you're probably not viewing this the best way, but I gave it my shot. Let's move into the next section. Okay, for leaders that could probably see like a change or two, something like maybe even Jackpot. I didn't think about that now, but that could probably go up. Fruits of Isgith I think could possibly go up. I just know it when you view it on just like a pure points thing. I think this is still possibly the highest in vacuum. Obviously passives of others can get you more, but consideration. But I would really say like Hidden Cache should go up, and Uprising. I'm not voting for these like anytime soon, but just to kind of talk about it. Maybe even Enslave go down because those decks have been very strong for a while. But yeah, other than that, that's just kind of, I don't think messing with leader provisions here is doing too much, really. The issues isn't so much like, because some archetypes are like tied to leaders, and buffing like a leader provision up or down isn't changing too much of that. You need like overhauls of the cards themselves or significant changes. So, but at least wanted to touch on it. First we'll go up with some power stuff, just some other ones I considered. Milena, I think she could just be a 6/6. She's probably what? You get a little bit of utility if you like moved an enemy unit that was like row locked to an ability. So that's kind of cool, but you're not going to encounter that every single game, and nor do I think that's like worth having more provisions than power. And just on your side, she's probably like what, a 1 point per turn engine, like nothing too crazy. So I think just being 6/6 is completely fine. I don't think that's anything wild. And again, a buff to ST, they could probably use a couple, especially in their bronzes. That's honestly would have to be a whole other video, because I was just looking through the bronzes and it's an absolute mess that I think would just have to be hit by kind of community at once. But a lot of the bronze issues with that is more like abilities, or just very basic abilities, and if you bump it up in power provisions, you could honestly like overtune with some stuff. So those ones would be tricky. Next up, I would say, another one for ST is, I just thought of this. The, only damages by 4, I forget her name. Milane, I don't know. Yeah, this needs to be addressed. I think we need to get to some of these other ones first. But yeah, this card probably, since we can't change damage, needs to go probably to like a 7 provision card. So that would be like another one. So I guess in the provision section, we're still in the power section. I just want to bring it up before I forget. Next one might be kind of questionable. Let's change it all. Zeri Nova. I wouldn't mind this just going to a 9/9. I'm not going to die on this, so I'm not going to argue it forever. But I honestly feel like in Golden Nekker decks, I debate whether or not to even include her anymore. Just feels really bad just playing an 8 out there. So I wouldn't mind if she was just a simple 9/9. Would make that play feel a little bit better. But I'm also not going to like massively push this. There's so many other things we had to get through. But that might be one of my hot takes, I guess, to be like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but we're going for it. Next one, Slave Driver. Yeah, this could probably go to like 2 power and still be very strong. You'd probably honestly want to push it more to like a 6 provision card, but right, with Imperial Marine going up to 6 provisions, Nauzica's definitely getting nerfed in one way or another. I'm going to be shocked if that doesn't. I don't know if you'd want like to keep pushing all these 6 provision cards, because you don't want to like completely kill the bronze package of a faction. So I think just bringing it down a little bit to 2 is reasonable. I've seen some other people recommend that. Talked about this when I was talking about Kaer Trolde, but yeah, Dwayne Meandra I think could go down to 3 power. She very easily plays as a 10 for 5. On honestly more with like synergies and stuff. I just, that, like, okay, yeah, you have to have the deck building thing of having a location, and she can brick pretty hard, so I get that, but at the same time, like 10 for 5s and honestly 11 12s, like that's pretty crazy. You know, like in the alchemy deck, she holds that one together with being able to replay stuff off like mushy truffle. Yeah, I'd say bringing her down to 3 makes some sense, but didn't go the all-in boat. There was enough of like counter argument in my mind where it's like, just leave it. She's fine as is. There's bigger problems. Another one, because we have Draug, I considered this one for power increase, but I wanted to kind of help monsters out a little bit more. Revenant, just making it, you know, 4 for 4 with the 1 damage. This helps a little bit more just playing from hand, but creates a lot of issues now with the spawn ones all being 1 power extra. A lot harder to answer, right? When all these other 4s are spawning out, not just 3s. You're gonna need, if you're a deck that has like pinging or giving out damage or whatever, you gotta have 1 more for each one. Or if you're a deck running removal, I mean, I guess overall between 3 or 4, you're not too taken aback. You're like, yeah, I can handle that anywhere, but that would be the only thing where I was just kind of like, would that cause problems? So might go for it in another patch. We'll see how it goes. But that could also, so this would be like another instance, instead of like Draug here, you could just buff this up to 4, and that already makes this a lot better, because all the ones that you transform when they're spawning, they're now 4. So like that'd be another example of what I was talking about. But yeah, kind of rambling on with this one, so we'll move on to the last one for power. This, a slight boost to hand buff and just makes her feel better than just playing 6 points out. You know, 7, 8 would probably be a lot better. So nothing crazy there. There's a lot more that I would do. Like for all the other ones I've listed, I'd rather do than Ithlin, but I thought about that. Like hand buff could use it. Could also do like Philophandrel, but I'd rather approach that with provisions. So we'll go ahead and transfer into that. Philophandrel. Yeah, I get why you do power, because it gets you closer to playing like better Scoia'tael special cards like, faster. But at the same time, like 12 provisions, and again a faction with very competitive, you know, higher end golds, just isn't cutting it. So I say this could probably be like a 10 provision card. Yeah, I'd stand by that, but 11 at least. We gotta get it going down. Next, we have Hjalmar, if I can spell, Seawolf. I know why this is like a 14 provision card, because you can get like insane clash here, especially because he's probably going to have a lot of armor, possibly over 10, and so it's just like absolute delete. And then this is a potentially very strong engine here, but I just think when you go to build like a pirate deck, or even I guess if you're trying to do this for warriors, but if you are, then you're not getting the armor on him if you're playing on a warrior deck. Maybe you could try some hybrid, but anyways, when it comes to just deck building, I don't think you're setting this up very well to get... Well, no, yeah, this actually, looking at it, because you were doing armor on for like adjacent ones, so yeah, this would have to pretty much be a pirates deck. You could just maybe try and include a little bit of a warriors package to like get those raids up. But anyways, besides the point, getting sidetracked, it's just kind of awkward. Like, you're not really going to set that up very well where you're like, oh yeah, I'm playing like a lot of raids after this, and you know, getting more armor down, and then raids and more armor. It's just not happening. It's almost just kind of playing it for the clash. And there's honestly like better ones out there. You know, the monsters one, right? Obviously, that one is going to have more damage go into it versus, and like the average deck you're playing it, versus this, which I said you could get the armor up over, so it is like, yeah, I just did like 20 points. But overall, just kind of awkward, and I think 14 provisions is pretty expensive. It's just not going to be played. You could bump it down to 13 and give it a little bit better chance to go in, so that's kind of one I would recommend. Next, back to Syndicate. Ulrich, yeah, Firesworn could use some love, and I think this would be a good card to do it for. Again, also devotion buff, right? We're kind of wanting to bump up devotion here. Not really so much with the bronzes in this instance. This would be a gold. But yeah, this card could use some love, I think, being 10 provisions. You get 2 engines on the board. It's not too bad. Like, I can see why that provisions is that, but when you look at, just Firesworn in general, could use some love, because it's not going to get it from, like, really any leader change. Because we can't change leader, right? We could just do provisions, and that's not changing it. Like, Congregate probably needed a different leader ability, or passive, or something like that with it. So there's a lot that could be said for Firesworn, but I think this would be the one that I'd recommend most to do. You can also probably try and slip it in other decks too, which would be pretty good, because you don't want just like a one-trick pony. Next would be traps. So sticky, I can't spell, sticky situation. Like, it's phenomenal when you get it to go off, but it's like, okay, you have to use it round 1, because everything else, it's just like, it turns trash and then absolute hot garbage by round 3. And then it also, unit has to play with 4 or less and flip self, right? So you could get really unlucky where you're not flipping it till after a couple cards and you're losing a lot of points in that. And traps just, since the change, it got some new tools where it's like, yeah, it's pretty strong. I wouldn't say it's the most trash thing, but like, it's not that great overall. And so they could use a couple extra provisions. This would be a good one for it, just because it's so conditional. 8 provisions is very expensive for how conditional that is. The other one, this one's very risky. I don't know if I'm gonna stand by this, but like, maybe Incinerating Trap to 4P. I think for a pure trap deck, that's completely fine. It would help them out a lot to have a 4P trap. And I really wish CDPR had just designed a 4P trap. Unless I'm forgetting one, but I don't think I am. Let's confirm that. Nope. Okay, we're good. Let me just reset everything. Anyways, back to this. The only reason why I don't want to... I cannot spell. There we go. The only reason I don't want to do this is because then I feel everyone just starts running it. And being able to delete a unit up to 5 for 4 provisions is very strong. It just feels really bad at 5 provisions. But it's one of those things like, man, you change it in that category, you're at a whole different power level. And so, that's pretty tough with it. Like, I wouldn't mind if we could change the damage values, but we unfortunately can't do that. So, I think it's a consideration, but I also feel the downsides of it and just being overplayed. Like, I think every ST thing would just run this as a 4P, because, like, why wouldn't you? And I don't want that, so not going to die on the hill. But it is a consideration, and traps would love it. But next up, we have a card that really needs to go down in provisions. Amphibious Assault. Yeah, with the Demomen existing, this does not need to be 14 provisions anymore. NR I don't really think is... It's probably like, what, SK and NG are probably like top dogs right now. So it's not like NR's already number 1 and, oh, this card could just use it. It's like, we're not looking at this entirely in a vacuum. We're also looking at like the faction as a whole. And this would be pretty great. To have go back down, especially because I wouldn't be surprised if we see Muted Generator and Temple Nerves, which those are the other ones that, I would throw in here. But if that's kind of happening and NR's getting hit in some of those ways, like Amphibious Assault could be kind of a slight correction for that. We're like, hey, this card's way more playable now. So yeah, that brings it up to the next one, like Temple. I could see the argument for this for 13p. It's like actually crazy. You can get 3 very solid golds, and then you can boost up one of your dual units. What it like boosts by 9 or whatever. That's just crazy. Very, very strong. So I could see the utility of this being 13 provisions, just because, with like a Demomen who's able to kind of clear out and you can play stuff with with the pincer maneuver leader, like you get access to those golds. Right, there's no denying that. Something with what's that 10 provision one that siege unit? Rafford's Vengeance, yeah, right. Like that can thin your deck a lot, so you're gonna see those golds. So being able to put 3 high provision ones is very strong at 12 provisions. You know, it's almost like an auto include for most Northern Realms decks. Could probably see a nerf. Haunt could probably see, you know, go down to 13 provisions. Not really played. It's really only for Death Wish. Like there's not like, oh, you know, like Siege. You can just throw Siege in a lot of decks, and you've got a couple Siege units in there, and it's like boom, you got a lot of power. Haunt, not really. And that's the thing with monsters, right? They're more kind of contained. Like you're going to play this deck, and then you're going to play this deck, and then you're going to play this deck. Whereas, you know, something like NG or NR can have a little bit more fluidity between the types. So with that, let's buff Haunt. You know, let's get to that. Let's make that 13 provisions. It was a huge mistake, you know, right? I should make a whole other video about this, but to keep it short, right? With so many things, when a card with issues came up, they always tried to nerf it indirectly. So, right, V decks. Instead of just nerfing V heavily or over, you know, like doing a makeover on its skill set or whatever, reworking, that's the word I'm looking for. Instead of doing any of that, it's like, no, we'll just take away a leader charge with Death Wish. And Death Wish, I think, has never really properly recovered from it. That really hurt that deck, losing a whole just easy consume. You had to fit one more in there, either in terms of like a unit that could consume twice or just a straight up consume unit, and really made that kind of deck, that archetype, a lot more awkward. And so we can't change anything with the leader charges, unfortunately. That would be a way to do it, but we could approach Haunt. So next we have Renew. A little bit risky because I'm sure you get this low enough, you're going to get some absolute BS coming out, but only playing a, you know, it's not like you get to replay Golden Nekker, right? It's only units of 9 or less, but this is 12p card. It's just not played a lot. We can make it 11, 10, I think is completely fine. Keep it outside of Golden Nekker range. So I would recommend doing that one. You could also do the flip side of this one. You guys know what I'm talking about. Where it pulls from your opponent's graveyard. That one could probably also go down. Opens up some flexibility, opens up some beam potential. Why not? Speaking of traps earlier, should have went to this. Really cannot type today. There we go. Yorvis Gambit. Before you'd even approach like Incinerating Trap, right? Should just go Yorvis Gambit here. I'd say, right, because you're going all in on traps, really. 10 provisions? Should we try and push that towards 10? Obviously, first step's 11. But this didn't take any of my priorities because I think after the slight change where you get to choose them, I already made this card a lot better. But it could still go down. It's very expensive. And so I think, you know, if you change Sticky Situation and you made this like 11, 10 provisions, traps are already way happier. And then the, we already talked about Philevandrel. You could go power provisions with it. I'd lean more towards provisions. But the last card that I think needs to be changed is this stupid card. I'm going to go on a little bit about this. I don't know. Like, if we're just talking about power, like, this card is absolutely insane, busted so very strong, and I don't know why they did that. Because in this game, typically, except for Golden Nekker decks, right, you want this disparity. You want to play as many high-end golds as you want, because, right, instead of like, oh, I got, you know, 10 points for 6, or I played an 8 provision card and got 11 points. It's like, yeah, I played a 14 provision card and got 22 to 25 to 30 points. Like, when you get past, I'd say like 10, 11 is a little bit more on the balance curve, but like when you get to the 12, 13, 14 provision cards, their ceilings are just unreal. And you want to play a lot of those, right? And you also typically don't see all the cards in your deck. What is it, like the rule of 16 or whatever that you're typically only going to see? And so you want a lot of 4 provision cards because A, you're not going to see them, so you don't want them to impact your deck too much. And then you've got this card where it's like, okay, so we're going to be a strong 4 provision card, so you're going to want to play us, right? You know, totally fine, and we're going to help you build up the higher end of your deck. But if you draw us, we are a payoff for playing all those high provision cards. Like, it helps both sides of the coin there. It's just insane that, you even only have a couple, right? You only play like 4 cards over, which most decks do. This is an 8 for 4, right? Remember, I'm trying to get Devotion up to that. I think Devotion, like, is super huge payoff. The strongest a bronze should be in terms of just like points for provisions, right? 8 for 4. And it's like, this can do it without even trying. And if you try a little bit, I think what 11-12 is very feasible with it, and it helps you achieve that by being a 4 provision card. So this needs a provision nerf. You could also probably do power to curb that down a little bit more, so that's also fine. But I think provision nerf is what needs to see, because it takes away one side of the coin, right? It no longer helps you achieve the ability to play more golds, right? Because now it's a 5 provision card. Now you're having to put some more costs into it. It's like, okay, you know, I have some disparity in my deck. I'm going to play this one and get a little bit of payoff for it. Does that potentially kill the card? Yeah, probably. So I could see, like, if you wanted to make this work, make it more like 2 base power, would probably be a lot better. But I'm going to go just kind of for 5 provision here, because I just think it's insane that, right, so many of these other things have like a take back. This doesn't. It's doing both things. 4 provision, you know, filler card with quotation over that, and then also just having payoff. Like, if you do draw it and play it, you're like, oh wow, I got 11 points. Sweet. Crazy. So that kind of covers everything I have on there. There's probably a couple takes where you're like, yeah, this guy's stupid, but I think most of it's fairly reasonable. And there's also a lot more I can talk about, but just wanted to make a video of what I'm going with my votes over here and other ones I considered. So let's go ahead and submit here. Votes are in. Alright, cool. Let me know what you guys are voting for, what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one.